This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. First question is going to be from Zach, who says, the Browns are obviously out of playoff contention. Jameis has been a good backup QB while we have had to sort out the position long term. Is it worth starting or somehow rotating DTR in the mix? Could it provide us with some trade value later on with DTR? And is DTR likely gone anyway? So would it hurt to tag him in? Okay, I thought you were about to say tag him, like franchise or transition tag. So there is a cost to putting DTR in, I think, right? That I don't feel like people who advocate for putting DTR in value, which is, yes, Jameis Winston doesn't have to like it. Yes, Jameis Winston is not the quality of quarterback to where you have to do things that he likes, right? That's not where Jameis is in his career. You could technically tell Jameis to do whatever, and the Browns could do whatever to end the season. But Jameis isn't the only person who's going to have an opinion in that locker room about the Browns changing quarterbacks, right? Even at this point of the season. And we can argue it's meaningless. It doesn't really matter, this, that, the third. But people are going to feel things, and those things don't just go away. So if you do bench Jameis to put in DTR, and then DTR stinks, what you are risking is two things. One, people losing faith in your decision-making at quarterback within the building, right? Like outside the building, whatever it is, we don't know how Deshaun Watson got here, why he can continue to play. Our opinion outside the building, not really important to the product on the field. But the opinion of the people in that building, it is, right? The players, if they lose faith in your decision-making at quarterback, well, that's a bit of a problem, right? And if you do something like bench Jameis and put DTR out there, and because of that, Jerry Jeudy's numbers take a stifling dip. The offensive production takes a stifling dip. The defensive numbers go even worse because now they're getting put on the field a ton. Like you saw on Hard Knocks where Myles Garrett was talking about the fact that he didn't like that the offense wasn't really moving the ball much, and that was putting the defense on the field. This is a guy who thinks about this stuff, right? Myles is going to think about what's going on the offensive side of the ball. There's a reason why he's going out there in the press conference and making it clear that, hey, look, I'm not just going to sit around for anything. Like, if y'all just start doing anything at quarterback, anything in the building, then I'll make decisions that I need to make. But right now, he seems pretty loyal to Kevin, pretty loyal to Andrew Berry. I'm pretty loyal to the Haslam family. You do stuff like bench DTR, it's not going to set Myles off the edge or nothing. Like, he's still going to be with the team, but it's going to be another thing that chips at it, right? So you have to ask yourself, like, are you confident enough in DTR to where that possibility is not going to be something that happens? I don't know if I have that amount of confidence in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think he will be fine at first. The problem with Dorian Thompson-Robinson has been that when something goes wrong, he has not shown the ability to be able to overcome said thing going wrong, right? Like, he can learn a lot from Jameis. Jameis Winston will have some of his best drives in the game after he throws an interception. And that's awesome. Not awesome that he throws an interception, but it's awesome that okay, we're not going to get a Jameis meltdown game. Like, he's going to come back and be fine afterwards. DTR melts down at times, right? And you could just see the team is so aware of that tendency of his. Maybe he grows out of that, maybe he doesn't. But if that happens, then, it's not going to be something that, again, takes people out long term, but it is going to be something that people think about, when you're making other decisions at the quarterback position. It just gnaws away a little by little at the trust in the locker room between the team and the coach. And in a season like this, where there's been a lot of kind of stress on that relationship, I just don't see the benefit in potentially adding more stress there. Like you just don't got to do too much, right? And I think putting in DTR, I get why you would want to do it, and if Jameis goes out there against the Chiefs and throws 5 interceptions, then you don't have to worry about any of this, because then nobody cares if you bench Jameis or not. But if he's playing relatively well or relatively normal and you bench him, and we get to a place where it's like, okay, I don't know why it is that we're doing this. And again, it gnaws away at the trust between the locker room and the coach, which seems to be good for a 3-10 team. I just see no reason to add to that, right? So there is some cost. I don't think it's a cost-free, why not type of situation to put DTR in. I think there is a cost. And I think sometimes the people who advocate to put DTR in don't really think that one thoroughly enough about what the potential human cost could be, because we're just thinking about how it looks from, numbers wise. Joey says this: Q, if you were Andrew Berry, what position or type of player would you say must be drafted this offseason for the Browns? In my opinion, we had to come out the draft with at least one running back, an offensive tackle. I like us to add more speed in the wide receiver room. What do you think? I don't think it's a good idea, Joey, to be this specific about what you want from the draft, because you don't have that much control on the draft. And when you're trying to be this specific about the draft, that's how you end up need drafting, where you're just, I need to take a running back. Let me get a running back. I need to take a wide receiver. Let me take Anthony Schwartz, let's take the fastest wide receiver, right? I need to get an offensive tackle. Let me get an offensive tackle, right? You want to be in a spot where you're addressing problems with your team, but also getting the best players available for those problems. So for me, I don't see the Browns need to get a running back. They need to get an offensive tackle. They need to improve the run game. That can include a number of players that you can draft that can help improve your run game. You can get a running back. You can get a running back and an offensive guard. You can get an offensive guard and an offensive tackle. You can get an offensive tackle in a center. You can get an offensive guard in the center. You can get a running back in a center. Like, you see what I mean? Where there's just so many different combinations of way to go about it to improve your run game, right? Like if you want a wide receiver and you want to add more, because like the reason I would assume you want speed is you want to add more explosive plays to the offense. Well, think about it like this. Like, okay, we need to add explosives to the offense. Getting somebody like Ashton Genty he's not going to run a 9 route, right? He's not going to run a deep route and gash guys like Tyreek Hill as a receiver. But what he is an explosive play creator at the running back position. So you're addressing the same need, but you're drafting a completely different position than you envision, right? Like, that's kind of more of how I view the draft. Is not about specific positional needs, but it's like, what does the team need, right? Defensively, they need more run defenders on the second level. That could be a safety, that could be a nickel, that could be a slot corner, that can be a linebacker, right? Like, that can be a number of things. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself to a position, because there's runs on positions, there's players who go off the board that you didn't expect, players who are on your board that you didn't expect. You got to stay flexible, right, about what you need to address. And the truth about football is that solving these problems aren't as simple as, I need this position. You need to fix a thing. Maybe that position is the solution. Maybe that position's not, based on what the answers that are available to you in the draft. So that's kind of how I view it, right? And if you want the answer to how I view it, by the way, let me go back to the question so you guys can understand what I'm answering. If you want the answer to what I'm viewing, I think they need to address the run game. So again, that could be a number of players that you draft to address the run game. That's need number one to me. Like, you need to have a solid run game. And then I think a kind of roaming need is, hey, if there's somebody available at quarterback that you have a good feeling about, go take them. If there's 2 people you have a good feeling about, take them, right? Let's take some flyers on some quarterbacks. Let's take some chances on some quarterbacks. And I'm not saying you take them in the first round or anything like that, but outside the first round, you see somebody you like, hey, man, why not? You know? Because if that pick hits, nobody's going to care. Ken says, could Sam Howell be the next franchise quarterback for us? No, I don't think Sam Howell will be a franchise quarterback. Do I think Sam Howell has the possibility to be a quarterback for this team that could maybe be a bridge? Like, he's an option. I don't know if he's the option I will go with. He's not different enough from Jameis, right? For me to go with, and not more talented. Like, I feel like if you're going to go with that style, then you might as well stick with Jameis. But maybe you think since he's younger, he's more coachable. Yeah, he's an option for sure, I think. But, you know, I don't know if that's exactly what you want to go with. Preston says, what can we learn from the Denver Broncos on how to ease the transition from a very expensive quarterback dead cap hit? Well, here's what the Broncos did. They cut Russell Wilson. They took a big dead cap hit. And basically, they took a bunch of flyers at quarterback. And what Sean Payton did with Bo Nix is something I underestimated. Right? I talked about this in my video with Ryan Tracy. It's a great conversation about football. Make sure you go check that out. But what me and Ryan were talking about is sometimes we get so caught up into our evaluation processes, into the tools that we have to help us evaluate, like RAS scores, 40 times, EPA, all of this stuff that we do to help us evaluate. We kind of forget that drafting a quarterback for a coach, that's a relationship, right? And that relationship needs to work. Those guys need to gel really well or be people who work well together. What I underestimated was that, hey, Sean Payton got in that room with Bo Nix, saw his skill sets and said, that's a guy whose flaws I'm okay with. And I feel like I can work with his strengths. And if a coach feels that way about a quarterback, and that coach is somebody you trust, then you're probably going to end up in a decent place with that quarterback, right? And that's what Denver did. They took a quarterback who Sean Payton liked. He said, hey, look, I know people are complaining about his flaws, what he doesn't do, but those are things that I'm fine being a flaw for a quarterback. What I want is a quarterback who could do some of the things that Bo Nix does well, which is Bo Nix is very coachable. He's coached well. He's going to give some pushback, but Sean Payton likes that. So that is kind of what I want from the Browns to look at when it comes to quarterback. Is like, hey, look for guys that you feel like at the end of the day, you can live with their flaws, right? Is Jameis Winston the quarterback that you can live with the downsides of Jameis Winston being your quarterback? And that's why I drill it in every time I talk about Jameis Winston, that he's not going to fix some of these big flaws that you have with him, right? Because this is just what comes with the package with Jameis. And if you're not okay with that, if you keep going around and saying, oh, if he just changes this, then he'll be all right, you're never going to be successful with Jameis. There's a way to be successful with a lot of different quarterbacks, but you got to accept what their flaws are and what comes with how they play the game. If you can't accept that, right, if you're always trying to change that part of them, then you're not going to get the most out of that player. And for the Browns, they have to look at this quarterback class, free agent, and draft and ask themselves, hey, are you okay with Sam Darnold's flaws? Are you okay with Jameis Winston's flaws? Are you okay with the flaws that a Dylan Gabriel has, the limitations he has, or the flaws of Drew Aller's game, or somebody like that, or maybe it's Jalen Milroe, maybe it's Shedeur Sanders, maybe it's Cam Ward. Are you okay with the flaws that they have? Is that something you can work with? That's what you have to ask yourself, right? We can all fall in love with the positive traits and tell ourselves that the negative traits for a quarterback aren't going to be there. But you have to accept that, hey, that's what they bring to the table, positive and negative. Are you okay with what they bring to the table that you don't like? Is that something you can live with? That's what the Browns have to ask themselves, right? Because ultimately, with two guys, they got to a place where they couldn't deal with what they brought to the table, right? Baker Mayfield, all the turnovers, the hot potato with the football. They decided they can't deal with that. So they got Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun Watson came in there and played anti-interception football, basically, right? Was super protective over the football. And they decided they couldn't deal with that. Like, they got to decide what they're okay with being a flaw from a quarterback and live with it. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating that you just stick with Deshaun Watson or anything like that. It's crazy. Like, his flaws were just overwhelming. But if you do get somebody in here and they're as good as Baker Mayfield was, or as good as like Joe Flacco was at the end of the season, can you accept the inherent flaws that come with their play style? Because that's what Denver did. And ironically enough, right, we go to Russell Wilson, the old quarterback in Denver. The problem with him in Denver, they wanted him to be something he wasn't. They wanted him to throw over the middle of the field. They wanted him to do all these things. They never were okay with what Russ's skill set was and wasn't. He goes to Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin looks at that skill set and says, I love it. You can't throw over the middle field? I don't care about that. Just throw the ball to George Pickens. Give him all those rainbow balls. I like that, right? And it works in Pittsburgh. It's about accepting somebody's skill set and embracing it. And you can't just embrace anybody's skill set. You have to be comfortable embracing that person's skill set. And I think that's going to be the most important question for the Browns to ask themselves, right? Because I think internally they've been looking for perfect at quarterback. And right now you're not in a situation where you're going to get perfect at quarterback anytime soon. Joe Burrow is not walking through that door. Pat Mahomes is not walking through that door. Lamar Jackson ain't walking through that door. So if you're not going to get perfect anytime soon, well, you better learn how to work with imperfect. And I think the Browns are at that point to where you have no choice but to have to learn to work with imperfect. And they got to choose what imperfect they want to work with. I think that's been the problem with them. John Lowe, considering that most people don't view Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson as franchise. Oh, most people didn't view. Okay, I was about to say, bro, what you talking about? Most people didn't view Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson as franchise QBs. Can we still find a late or first, second round guy and develop them into a QB, into a star in this year's draft? And if so, what prospects should we get? And what do we need to do as an organization to help them grow to their fullest potential? I kind of hit on this on the last question, so I'll be brief here. But it's more or less that idea, right? Is there a player in this draft class that you feel like you're okay with what they can't do, and maybe they get better at that, maybe they don't, but you're okay with what their limitations are, and you love what they do bring to the table, and you feel like you could do a lot with it? In my video with Ryan, me and him talked about like Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. I think those are the two biggest examples. You brought up one of those guys. Jalen Hurts is another example of this. But Lamar Jackson, like if he goes to a bunch of different teams, it's not a guarantee that it works. Not because Lamar's not super talented, but because Lamar is a different kind of quarterback, and there would have been coaches who had a hard time embracing what Lamar brought to the table. You can say the same thing with Pat Mahomes, right? He goes to Andy Reid. Andy Reid is not going to tell a quarterback, don't take a risk with the football. Andy Reid is not going to try to stifle a quarterback's creative juices. But imagine if like young Pat Mahomes landed with Kyle Shanahan, a quarterback coach who is keen on saying, no, don't do that, and having hard rules and kind of like limiting what a quarterback can do because he wants them to fit their system. Doesn't mean that Kyle Shanahan's a bad coach. Doesn't mean that Andy Reid is the only coach that could have worked with Pat Mahomes, but it did take somebody to be willing to embrace even the crazier elements of Pat Mahomes in order to make that work. You look at this class, I think that's what you need to ask yourself. Are you willing to embrace this quarterback's flaws and work around them and not convince yourself that you can limit them? Right? Because as long as we're having a conversation about Jameis Winston, can you limit the interceptions? We're not going to get the best out of Jameis doing that. Like Jameis Winston plays his best football when he's throwing dots, and when he's throwing dots, he's also throwing interceptions. You just got to embrace that with him. Right? Now, there are some interceptions you can ask him to cut down, obviously. You don't want him to go 30 for 30 and be full uncut gems Jameis. But inherently, he's going to turn the ball over. Like, he's going to always be in the top 10 in turnovers. That's who he is. Because he's a risk taker. He's a gunslinger. Are you comfortable with the gunslinger? If you're not comfortable with the gunslinger, don't draft the gunslinger trying to turn him into a game manager. If you want a game manager, go get Dylan Gabriel, right? Game manager right there. Boom. Fresh. Ready-made. Lefty. Game manager. Small guy, but game manager. You can work with that. If you want somebody who has a little bit more upside, right? A little bit raw, but definitely has the skill set to work in this offense, maybe you could try to see if Drew Allure wants to come out this year. But you got to embrace whoever you get skill set instead of thinking that you're going to drastically change who they are. Even somebody like Josh Allen, who's gotten a lot of credit for being able to change his game, right? He's still Josh Allen. He still has those plays where he turns the ball over because he does something crazy. That's still part of his DNA. He has just found a way to tamp that down a little. That's the question I think the Browns have to ask themselves. They need to get a quarterback in here who they're okay with what their flaws are instead of praying that it goes away, right? Because every time we're in a situation, we're asking ourselves, can Baker Mayfield not throw interceptions anymore? Can Jameis Winston not throw interceptions anymore? Can Deshaun Watson throw the ball downfield? Like, we're just asking somebody to be what they're not at that given point in time, right? Got to embrace whatever you have at the quarterback position and get to a point to with whoever that player is, you can embrace their skill set. Mr. Z Noah says, Q, my man, love your show. I'm a fan. Appreciate that. My question, what do you think we get or go and get Joe Milton III from New England and have him sit and learn between Winston for the next season? As you know, dude is mobile, definitely has a big arm. Would love to hear your opinion. I mean, I'm not opposed to it as like a flyer. I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Milton, like coming out of college, coming out of Tennessee. He's also a little bit older, right? I think he's like the same age or a little bit older than DTR. So the timeline there can be a little bit funky. But if the Browns look at Joe Milton and say to themselves, they love his skill set and they can live with what his limitations are, then yeah, go out and do it. See if you can develop him, because that's more important than if I like it, right? But if they feel that way about him, I think that's a fine decision to make there. Jeremy says this, I hear a lot of opinions say that one or two problems will fix the Browns. Do you think it's that case, or do you think it's several smaller or bigger things that need to be tuned up? I mean, the way NFL seasons work is that it's on such a small margin almost every year exclusively that small things can change the trajectory of your season. Dustin Hopkins making kicks on a consistent basis could change the trajectory of your season. Having a quarterback who's just slightly better than Deshaun Watson was to start the year could completely change the trajectory of your season. This is just a saying I go by. In the NFL, you're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are, right? You're never as far away from 10 wins as you think you are. And, you're never as close to being a 14-2 juggernaut as you think you are, right? Like, you're always a good amount of distance there because it's a tough league. The margins of error are tiny. And that means you could be a good team and have a shitty record. Now, this team right here for the Browns, they're not a great team. They have not played great football. So I'm not saying that they're just a team that caught a couple bad breaks, and that's why the record's that. They're a bad team. They have a bad record, but they're not that far from being a good team. They are a couple things going the right way, a couple players playing a little bit better from being a good football team. So I try not to overreact year to year, especially because I've learned my lesson, right? After they won 11 games in 2020, I thought they were going to go to the moon. They didn't, right? They had a down season. After they did it in 2023 again, thought they were going to go to the moon. They had a down season. After they had those down seasons in 2021, I thought they were done, cooked. Everybody's going to get fired. They had an 11-win season. You know what I mean? Like, these 4 years have taught me that you're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are. The margin of error in the NFL is tiny, which means the difference between being an 11-6 team and a 6-11 team is not as drastic as you would think. Nathaniel says, I don't feel like Kevin has ever been able to pick the quarterback he's wanted. Do you think he'll get the chance? Yes and no. Like, is he going to get the chance to mold the guy that he wants and pick somebody who's absolutely perfect for him? No, that's never going to happen, because that's never how it works. But is Kevin going to be able to pick a quarterback on this team, that if he sees one and he likes him, like, to go out and get him? Yeah. Like, he has that opportunity. If that happens this year and he loves a guy, Browns will draft that guy, right? If Kevin pounds the table for a guy at quarterback and convinces Andrew Berry that that guy's the guy, the Browns will take that guy whenever that guy is there, right? So, yeah, he's going to get an opportunity to pick somebody that he advocates for at the quarterback position, right? Like, I think that's what I mean. You know, whether that be a draft pick, whether that be a free agent, he's going to get, like, if Sam Darnold ends up here, that's probably because Kevin pounded the table for that, right? Like, you know, the Deshaun Watson thing, it's hard to tell whether he pounded the table for that one. Let me bring back the other question. But it's hard to tell if he pounded the table for that one, because now we're talking about like the biggest guaranteed contract in history, and now Jimmy Haslam's involved for that. But like a Sam Darnold contract, you know, if that happens, it's probably because Kevin really wanted it to happen, right? If they go out and they draft the quarterback, you know, that Kevin really likes in the second or first round, it's probably because Kevin really wanted it to happen, right? Like, he's going to have those opportunities. The question is the guy going to be there that makes sense for him to do that for within the next few years, or while he's still coaching the Cleveland Browns? That remains to be seen. Booth says, do the stats bear out if Myles Garrett is a serious defensive player of the year? He's just not going to win it because he won it last year, and like, the Browns aren't good this year, right? Even if his stats were about the same, and they are looking like they're going to be about the same, he's not going to win it twice if the Browns aren't good. So the Browns kind of screwed him out of this one, right? He knows it. That's why he's frustrated. But yeah, if the Browns were like a 11-win team or 12-win team, or doing what Pittsburgh's doing, and he was playing how he's playing, he'd be a 2-time defensive player of the year lock. But since the Browns record is what the Browns record is, it's going to be next to impossible for him to get the award. And it should probably go to somebody else who kind of is more deserving of it. Now, I don't know who's going to win it this year, but, you know, Myles getting it for a second time in a row, it'd be a tough sell with the Browns record being what they are, and with the defense not being particularly great while the Browns record is what their record is. But that's it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.